Good evening, everyone. It's right around 6:30, a little after. We're going to begin. We have a presentation on Council Informational tonight by Anna Lawler, Project Manager, and Callie Coesti, Senior Program Manager for Trust for Public Land. So we look forward to what you're going to share. So the diocese is yours up here. Please give us a little information about yourself, name, where you live, that kind of thing. And we look forward to your presentation. And I hope I didn't mispronounce anyone's name.
Well, hi, thanks for having me. My name is Anna Lawler. I'm with the Trust for Public Land. I live in West Haven, Connecticut, so a little bit further down the coast. But Trust for Public Land is a national organization and nonprofit. Oh, there we are. Nonprofit conservation organization with offices throughout the country. So our office primarily works on land conservation and park development here in Connecticut. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what we do here and how we have partnered with municipalities across the state, up the Connecticut River, along the coast, and throughout the state to create parks and protect land. So first, I'm going to give a little bit of background just about Trust for Public Land in general. That's me, and this is Callie over here, Callie Coesti. So we believe that access to the outdoors is a fundamental human need and essential to our health and well-being. We know that people are healthier and happier when they spend time outside. We believe access to the outdoors is a fundamental human need, essential to our health and well-being, and the Trust for Public Land acts on that by protecting land and creating parks, ensuring healthy, livable communities for generations to come. So we also see throughout our work throughout the country that communities that place a high value on outdoor access for all are healthier, they're more resilient, and they are more equitable. These are just some of our stats that we like to sort of put into context of the work that the Trust for Public Land does throughout the country. And so this is not just in Connecticut, but across the US. We have done more than 5,000 projects, and that's parks, trails, schoolyards, and iconic outdoor places. And so we have protected national parks and places in holdings within national parks, and we have protected tiny, tiny, tiny pocket parks in urban areas. And so we like to say that we work from Main Street to mountaintop, because we really do it all. We've protected places along the Appalachian Trail, the Pacific Crest Trail, the North Country Trail. We have a really strategic commitment to protecting the national trails that are a treasure to this country. We have secured $94 billion in public funding for parks and access to lands and waters. That's through conservation finance and ballot measures across the country, both federally, statewide, and locally. And we have protected 4 million acres of public land. So why does Trust for Public Land do this? We do it because we know that communities need these spaces. It provides clean drinking water. It provides clean lakes, ponds, and rivers. Here in Connecticut, we know that the Long Island Sound watershed is incredibly important to the health of our ecosystem, and that people in Connecticut thrive on that ecosystem. It provides recreational opportunities, habitat protection, scenic rural character and livability to the communities and the people that live here. We protect historic resources. So farms that were once, the homestead of someone that was important to our Connecticut state history. We protected a property called Weir Farm in Wilton that is the home of J. Alden Weir, who was a painter, and it's now a National Historic Site. Cultural resources. Cultural resources can be important to a variety of different cultures that live and thrive in these communities. We know that open space also provides economic benefits and educational assets to the people that live here. We also see that there are sort of these ancillary benefits to open space. And so people who live near parks and open space will see enhanced property values. Recreation use and tourism brings dollars into the communities where these places exist. And so we've seen towns in Vermont where we've worked to create a community forest that was an old quarry, and turning that into this mountain biking destination has revived a community that was really, really flailing, frankly, because they had lost their industry. And so finding ways to bring recreation and outdoor tourism and revitalizing these communities has played a really big role in the economic impact, especially in places like Vermont and New Hampshire and places where recreation has a really big stronghold on the economies. And we're seeing that more and more in Connecticut. People are looking and searching for places to recreate close to home. We see improved health of area residents when you have access to the outdoors. Improved water quality and stormwater retention with changing climate and changing weather events. It's better for our air, it's better for the people that live here. And, Connecticut is I think Hartford is one of the asthma capitals of the world. And we know that having clean water and clean air and open space can help alleviate some of that and support a healthier community. Protecting these lands supports our agriculture and forest economies. Those are important. And they provide jobs and community cohesion and social connection, just more important than ever after the pandemic. We saw people were really searching for ways to connect with each other. And flood protection, especially in coastal and river towns. We've seen, protecting open space can be a natural sponge for places that would otherwise be subject to development and be more prone to flooding. So what does TPL do? That was sort of the overview. In Connecticut, we do a lot of fee purchase and a lot of conservation easement purchase. And so I'm going to sort of skip over that. Fee ownership is full ownership. You own all the rights. Purchase of development rights is when you're purchasing just limited rights to prevent the development. So we in Connecticut, in our office of 5 people, our national organization has about 350. We respond to communities that call us in because they want our help, and they want our help to achieve their open space and park needs. And so we don't do projects at Trust for Public Land on our own behalf or on our own, of our own accord. We look to the communities and the community leadership and what they want out of their communities and what the residents want out of their communities. And oftentimes we are responding because the community, the leadership, the citizens, the land trust sees an opportunity to buy a piece of land or create a park somewhere, and they don't have the capacity or the expertise or, frankly, the time to get it done. The Trust for Public Land, as a private organization, has the ability to be very nimble. And so we can negotiate with a seller in ways that it can be often difficult for a municipal board or that needs to go through the sort of the typical due process. We can work quickly, we can contract quickly, we can put down deposits. And so we sort of play that role of assuming a lot of the risk that a municipality or a city would have to take on and is not often able to take on in the time it takes. Real estate moves quickly. And so we are called to come help because we are wanted and needed. And where we are not wanted or needed, we and the communities can do it themselves. Those are the places where we would defer to the municipal or the land trust and often, offer technical assistance. But so TPL assumes all the risk. We sort of become the principal in the transaction. And so we negotiate with the seller and we do all of the due diligence, sort of soup to nuts, putting together, the appraisals, looking for financing, conducting the environmental assessments, the survey, all of that stuff that it takes to get a deal across the finish line and comply with, often funding requirements and agency standards. And so one of the reasons we often come to work in communities too is financing. And so if there's a piece of property that, might be very desirable for the city or the town to own or the land trust to own, but it's several $1 million and there isn't an appetite to necessarily, issue a bond in that amount, or there isn't the ability to secure grants in that amount. Trust for Public Land comes in, gets the property under, what we would call like site control or, under contract, and we're able to, sort of negotiate the time that it takes to put those grants together, put a municipal funding package together, if that's part of the equation, apply to state, local, and federal agencies for funding to complete the purchase price. And so we do all of that at Trust for Public Land, and we work with the whole time, sort of putting the community at the center of everything we do. We work with the community to achieve these outcomes. So at the end of the day, after we've worked, through all of the due diligence and all of the public and private fundraising that we need to do, we end up working with a partner to dispose of the land. And so sometimes that means conveying the land to the city or the town. Sometimes it's a land trust. Sometimes it's a nonprofit. Sometimes it's a federal or state agency. So we've done a lot of state parks. Like I said, we've done national parks, but a lot of the work that we do in Connecticut is open space for the communities where we work. And lastly, at the end of the day, we really want to ensure that these places are accessible to the communities that we've protected them for. And so making sure that there's adequate parking and that trails are accessible in the ways that they need to be accessible, and that people can access this new amenity for themselves. I'm going to skip a little bit over this because I just want to be mindful of the time. But one of the real keys, and I think I stressed this, was TPL's ability to negotiate sort of outside of the confines of the municipal process, and that's really a timing issue. And it also gives landowners the confidence that we're a private organization, we can keep things confidential at the stage that we're negotiating, and it gives them the confidence that our contract with them, our agreement to move forward, their ability to market the property should our deal fall through isn't compromised. And so that's one of the big attributes of, that TPL can bring to a negotiation. Like I said, we do all the due diligence. This saves municipalities and land trusts money. It's very expensive to convey open space because of all of the grant requirements through, if you're working with state grants or federal grants, there's requirements for surveys and appraisals, and those things really add up, and TPL takes on the cost and bears the cost itself. Lots of different types of ways to fund a project. I'm going to skip a little bit over this, but the biggest one in Connecticut is really the Open Space and Watershed Land Acquisition Grant Program, and we've worked with that project historically. I'm sure Norwich has worked with that program to fund open space. But there's also bond funds and federal funds and local open space funds. So I wanted to take just a second to sort of highlight a project where we really put it together that was sort of local to Norwich. But in Stonington, we had a 200-some acre property and a purchase price of just over $1 million, and we were looking to protect it as open space at the behest of Avalonia and the town of Stonington and the community and the people that live around there. And so we realized very early on that we weren't going to be able to secure a single funding source. The town of Stonington didn't necessarily have the ability to bond for that much at that point in time. Going through the OSWA program would have been a little bit difficult with this one. We knew that Fish and Wildlife was really interested, but that they couldn't necessarily come up with that kind of money for the whole property. And so we find TPL is really good at finding creative ways to structure these transactions so that we can come up with all the financing and have an outcome that everybody's happy with. And so we worked with Aquarian Water Company that contributed to a conservation easement on a portion of the property because they really wanted to see their reservoir protected. The town of Stonington really wanted to see it protected too, so they contributed around $250,000 from their open space account. And then Fish and Wildlife made up the difference by acquiring about half of the property at fair market value. So lastly, I was just going to touch on, when we work in communities and we work on a local conservation finance, so a municipal bond or a referendum or something like that, Trust for Public Land will take the lead on organizing that in partnership with usually like a citizens campaign. We will have site walks. We will have activities on the property to showcase them, townwide mailings, meetings, signs. We'll create a website. But ultimately, when we commit to something at Trust for Public Land, we're usually very successful, and we figure out a way to make it happen. And so this is just an example of a mailer we did, and I think that was my last slide. So I'm going to stop there and just say that TPL has strategic commitments to climate, health, and equity, and we are very committed to seeing those commitments through and working in the communities where we haven't worked that we know would benefit from a partnership. And so if there's ever a need in Norwich and Trust for Public Land can be of assistance, or something in this presentation sparked something that you think might go somewhere, we're just a phone call away, and we'd be happy to help. And my contact information will be at the end of the presentation after Callie takes it over. Thanks, all.
Hey everyone, my name is Callie Guasti. I am a program manager at Trust for Public Land. So Honor just explained sort of all of the work that we do in terms of land conservation, and I'm on the park side of things in Connecticut. And so what that means, both in Connecticut and nationally, is that we generally work more closely with a town or municipality that sort of already has space available. So one of our where we work the most closely at the moment is Bridgeport. And so the majority of our park and trail work takes place there. And the idea there is that the city already has vacant lots that they want to transform into these vibrant green spaces. And so we're the partner to basically try to push that vision and that goal forward. So I'll just give you a couple examples here, but in Bridgeport, which is the majority of our work in urban spaces, although we do work a little bit in Hartford, and we've worked a little bit in New Haven, the plan here is a 20-plus mile multi-use pathway for recreation and transportation. This came out of a city plan, a waterfront master plan that was put together in 2017. And the idea is to really take this trail, some of it already exists, so you can see in Seaside Park the solid parts, but connect the entire 20 miles that hug the shoreline and create this amazing park and trail network in Bridgeport. One of the other things that TPL really focuses on are, having open spaces and parks within a 10-minute walk from every resident from home, which I'll talk a little bit about more later. But with this project, we would be putting 40,000 people closer to or within that 10-minute walk from the waterfront pathway. And in Bridgeport, that's about a third of the city. And Honor sort of touched on a lot of this, but of course we know that there's a lot of mental health and physical benefits to outdoor recreation, accessibility, and in this case, a real cool connection to the shoreline. And to go back to this piece of where we work and how do we choose to work, we really do try to be there for the communities that need us the most. And in Bridgeport, obviously they face a ton of sort of a post-industrial landscape that has had a lot of hardship in terms of industrialization and burdening facilities that sort of continue to plague the city. And then a really high level of inaccessibility. So about 70% of Bridgeport's shoreline is inaccessible at the moment. So that's part of the reason that we really want to create this waterfront pathway. And I'll just give you a couple other examples. So one of the ways that we are sort of splitting up this 20-mile vision is by picking these particular opportunity sites. So these city-owned properties that are maybe blighted, vacant lots. So you can see in this photo, this is Sliver by the River. It's basically right when you get to the beginning of downtown Bridgeport. And it's this 4-acre sliver, right on the river. And this 4-acre lot has had a ton of community buy-in and visioning behind it. And the way that we often lead that process is we'll do participatory design workshops. We worked with UConn a lot with the landscape architect students to create charrettes for people to join and give their input on what would you like to see at this site? What could we imagine together? And then those architects takes that vision and runs with it. So just to give you that example, this is the conceptual design of that sliver by the river. And you can see there's just a ton of really cool amenities that the community has come up with, including a kayak launch and a floating dock, and a built-down sort of amphitheater and multi-use space for skating. And then you can actually see towards the northern part of the site, I'll just go back here, you can see that, even on a normal day, the site floods quite a bit. So this portion you see there is actually a salt marsh. So getting to that stormwater runoff, acting as a sponge for this site, which is both wonderfully for the ecological benefits of it, but actually really necessary at Sliver just to protect the rest of the park. And yeah, just wanted to also highlight that a lot with our park work and really with all of our work, we really do involve the communities and different partners. So here we work really closely with different nonprofit partners and community partners on the ground, like Groundwork Bridgeport, and other folks to really have the vision together. So we've done many cleanups at the site, getting people excited about using the site in the future. And you can see in this other photo where people are in a circle, that's a technical advisory committee meeting where a bunch of stakeholders, both at the state level, the city level, and the local level, have gathered to sort of convene and give feedback on what else they think might come up with the soon-to-be park. And I'll just run through this quickly, but this is another example. We're still sort of in the beginning of the design process, but another example of kind of city-owned parcels that are ripe for restoration and really exciting to have some accessibility in the future. And it's going to follow a very similar trajectory as Sliver by the River. So first, design work, which we've done. We have secured the grant to actually do the design, and we're looking for the implementation funding. This just gives you a visual of that site, which is along the Yellow Mill Channel. Waterview Park is one of those 3 parcels. And yeah. So just to change gears a little bit, I wanted to share one other piece of work that we're on. This actually started from a land acquisition project that Honor was a part of, which was Mono Pond State Park, which added 400 acres to the existing state park. Now that land is acquired, the towns surrounding are super excited about it, and have basically asked TPL to get involved to think through a trail plan for the park. So we got a state grant and were able to hire International Mountain Biking Association, aka IMBA, to contract with us and do a master trails plan for the park. So we're really excited about that, and the outcome of that will be a proposed 14 miles of new trail within Mono Park. And some of that will be mountain bike optimized, some of that will be multi-use trail, some of that will be hike only, but we're really excited about that sort of next step and sort of continuing to build our trail portfolio in Connecticut. And lastly, I just wanted to touch on this because it might be something of interest to Norwich or perhaps other towns in Connecticut. But one other aspect of our work, I had mentioned earlier that we have these goals around 10-minute walks, and we know that about 1 in 3 residents in the United States lack access to a park very close to home. And about 40% of that statistic are actually children. And so we know that gap is even more significant when it comes to accessibility and equity and quality of that park. So I just wanted to highlight that there's this program called the 10-Minute Walk Park Accelerator Program, also known as PEA. And essentially what it does is it offers technical assistance to different cities to move the needle on park quality and equity. So basically it works with cities to think through, what are your parks and open space goals, and how can we assist you? So I just wanted to highlight that, and a lot of this comes from, as we know, parks are often the first, on the chopping block. They're often underserved. The infrastructure can be failing. There's also, of course, always the maintenance problem. Who's going to actually take care of the park once it's built, or the park that's already built? So there's a lot of reasons as to why this park equity divide exists, but it is very pervasive.
Can I interrupt for a second?
Yes.
I just want to ask how you define what a park is. I know that sounds like a stupid question or a simple question, but there's various definitions depending on who you ask on that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I know that we have, depending on sort of like the conversation, there are different definitions. But I don't know, Honor, do you have a sense of what, I think it might have to do with, acreage.
I didn't mean this to be a
No,
stump
no.
the speaker question.
I think in terms of like what we're talking about today, a park would be more of like a developed piece of open space. So it might have a playscape or it might have amenities.
Something already, what you're saying, or would, okay. Because there's different, you could have a passive park that's still, we call it a park, but it,
Sure.
Yeah.
you had a picture with children on a, climbing thing, so I thought it was more oriented towards that, but it could be other things.
It could be other things. Yeah, I think it could be
I think
both.
it's a fluid term that we use sort of loosely depending on, I think everything's a park. It's just, that urban setting, you're gonna have perhaps just, a playscape, perhaps not.
Right.
And in sort of the rural context, we often refer to it as open space. But it's a park nonetheless. They're all.
We have a mixture here. It's a pretty unique community. It has an intensive downtown, but then if you go north part of the town, it's very rural, in one place. So there's the different definitions depending on where you are in the city. So,
Totally.
but thank you.
Yeah, and I think, right, and then definitely public use, right? Like being open to the public is definitely the key component, really of all of our work, but definitely of parks. But that's a good question.
Thank you.
Yeah. So just finishing up here, just going back to this technical assistance program, which we call the PEA. These are some of the stats across the country. So there's over 300 mayors nationally that have committed to this 10-minute walk program, which just means that they're dedicated to pursuing how this might work in their city, and looking into that using the resources that TPL offers. There's been just a ton of different trainings and coachings that this 10-minute walk team has provided across the country. And there's even opportunities to help with policy changes, or funding and practices like grants, and sort of talking through what are your public funding options in your city that are available to you. So that's one of the technical assistances that we offer. And I share that also to say, oh, I missed that slide, but actually both New Haven and Bridgeport are in this program this year. So I think it's the third year of this cohort, and they are just 2 cities. There's actually only 6 nationally, so 2 of them just happen to be Connecticut cities this year. So exciting, and I'll be in those meetings learning about what park needs might be met through that. But just wanted to share that program, and yeah, we have sort of an array of opportunities of how we can assist municipalities and towns. So thanks so much.
Question.
Any questions? Yes.
Don't know if you can answer this. Your experience with deals that collapse, even after state award of grants, is it your experience that your expertise could help resurrect such an opportunity? This council went on record to support the preservation of 101 acres in the Occam section of Norwich. Went so far as to get an award from the state of a grant, significant grant. I guess at the end of the day, the owners didn't like the appraised values that came back, and so they backed out after all that transpired. Do you have any experience in helping resurrect such opportunities?
I think we've resurrected many deals. At the same time, no one's a magician, right? And people who have value expectations, it can often be difficult to come back from those. But one thing and one benefit that Trust for Public Land can bring to those kinds of situations is that we always say if we're going to fail, we like to fail fast. And so if we are going to go out and seek a grant, we would want to be under contract, but oftentimes you don't have the benefit of an appraisal. You know, it's always worth a second, third, fourth shot if it's meaningful to the community, and sometimes appraisers get it wrong. We're all human, and so, you know, taking another shot at it is something we've done many, many, many times, and we're happy to look at anything that needs a second look.
Okay, thank you. The other concept, you talked about pocket parks. We're in the process of creating one, we hope, downtown. We've been utilizing the Community Investment Fund programs that provided for, we're eligible for that. If there are portions of the cost of development not met through those efforts, is that something you also could step up and assist as it moves forward? A lot of these, whether it's a direct developmental issue, or in this case, a recreational and housing and development opportunity, need a series of financial resources or stacking needs to take place for it to be completed. Is that a role you're able to help with as well?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it would, yeah, definitely depend on the context, but it would be a conversation that we could have, and yeah, are pretty good at figuring out the funding stack and where we might be able to add to it, and maybe funding sources you hadn't looked into, and partnering on that. So for sure, an option.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the challenge with Connecticut is that there's no one funding source that funds 100% of an acquisition here in Connecticut. We are often piecing it with, you know, federal Highlands grant or Fish and Wildlife funds or private foundations. And so we're often, you know, that's sort of a big value add of Trust for Public Land is we're so used to piecing these things together. That's really typical way that we would put a project together, is to look at what funding is there and look at what other funding might not have been explored, but that would fit, you know, if it's a pocket park on the shoreline, is there, you know, coastal resilience money that we could, you know, unearth through some federal agency? I mean, yeah, we leave no stone unturned when it comes to money.
All right, thank you. Members of council, Alderwoman Gould.
Thank you for being here tonight. So in one of your slides, you mentioned cultural resources. So we just spent a lot of money, time, and effort doing Uncas Leap. I don't know if you're familiar with the area on the Yanick River. We've just created a beautiful park there, and we'd love to see it maybe become a national park. And do you help us put that together?
We can certainly explore it. One of the the one national historic site that Connecticut has, and really the only federally owned piece of land aside from the Appalachian Trail and the New England National Scenic Trail that run through Connecticut, is Weir Farm. And one of the steps in creating a new national park or a new national historic site is often that advocacy. And so it really has to sort of, there has to be a lot of organizing with the federal government on designating that. And so that would certainly be a conversation we'd be happy to explore and look into. And I think, you know, what we know is that the national historic sites that exist in this country tell a very small fraction of our shared history, and we are absolutely looking to sort of tell the full American story. And I think the National Park Service, you know, is with us on that. And so if it's, you know, it's certainly a conversation we would love to explore. But I'm not familiar with the site itself, so I can't speak to
Well,
it.
we have to take you right over there.
Yeah, sounds great. I'm up. I'm up for it.
My other question is, what about environmental issues that a site may have?
Yes.
How do we, you know, unfortunately, in the post-industrial age, we have a lot of places that were mills, they, you know, how do you help us with that?
Yes. Well, That has certainly been a roadblock across this state, because a lot of, especially in urban areas where, you look under any rock in Danbury, Hartford, or Norwich, you're going to find something, right? And so we are actively, we also know that those are the places that need parks and open space most. And so we want to serve that injustice, and we want to, rectify it. And so one of the ways, and I will give an example of a project we're working on in Hartford, where the site was contaminated. It was a former parking, milk staging truck for Seal Test Dairy, and we knew that the community wanted, and they were already using it for garden beds and open space, and it was this sort of rich cultural meshing of community there, and it was, it was turning into this beautiful thing, but it was dirty. And so Trust for Public Land came in at the behest of the community, and we did the environmental investigations, and we found that, yes, it is dirty, as we suspected. And so we actually, this year, and I think Norwich was probably the recipient of one of these, got a Deep CERCLA grant for a property that funded us to do the environmental investigation on this site, and that will lead us to understand what the full remediation costs will be. And so through that same grant program, hopefully that there is one where we can go back and say, okay, we've done the assessment. We know it's going to cost about $200,000 or $500,000 to remediate this property, and we can seek another grant to do that actual hard, that remediation, earth-moving activity. And then from there, there are grants at the DECD and the DEP and other nonprofits where we can do the design work to turn that space into a park. And it's a slow process because there are regulations about, what standard it needs to meet to be a park or to be residential. And it can often be, cost prohibitive to do these projects. And that's a real roadblock that we're facing. But I do think that there's a lot of folks at the state and local level realizing that these are roadblocks, but it's an impasse we need to get past, and so we're working towards figuring something out. So I would say that is exactly the kind of project we want to take on, and we want to help cities and towns achieve, especially when it's contamination, which is often an environmental injustice, and often in low-income communities or neighborhoods, and so we're absolutely committed to that.
And my last question, does the park have to have a connection to water? Or could it be just in an urban area, and we just said, well, how about right here on this spot? Doesn't necessarily have to connect to a waterway or?
No, absolutely not. No, we do parks and open space and conservation regardless of zip code or water access or anything like that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? Alderman Singh.
Thank you very much. So thank you for all the work you have been doing. I think it's very necessary work in this age. In order for you to do your magic, do you have to get the ownership of land, or it can stay in the city's name? Or you will have to move it under the Trust of Public Land?
No, that's actually a good point. I didn't touch on that much, but Trust for Public Land's business model is actually to not own the land. We're not a typical land trust in that we really facilitate these transactions, but we don't ever take ownership. We partner with a land trust, whether it's a local land trust or a regional land trust or a municipality or the city or a government agency.
Avalonia, for instance.
Or Avalonia, they will be the final owner, the city will be the final owner. And that is, that ownership model is dependent on the needs and desires of the community at hand. And so if it's something the city wants to own and manage, then absolutely, by all means. If it's something that the city doesn't want to own and manage, then we would seek another partner that is willing to take on that role and has the capacity to do so.
So they will pay city whatever the appraised value of land is?
What was that?
They're gonna be the landowner, let's say Avalonia wanna work with you on one piece of land we have, and we're trying to make it into some park. So they will get the ownership, but do they pay the cities some appraised value for the land?
Oh, so if the city were selling land?
That-
Yeah, so we, one of the tenets of our work is we need a willing seller. And so if the city was a willing seller and there were no restrictions on that land, I mean, this is all theoretical, right? And you had a piece of land and the city said, we're gonna get rid of this, we don't wanna own it anymore. But we're willing to sell it to a conservation organization because we see value in having this piece of land become a park or open space. Then we could certainly work with a partner to see if there was an interest in that acquisition and if the community was interested in having a park there. Like I said, we don't do projects of our own accord, but if there's a desire within the community, then absolutely we would respond to that. And just because the city owns it doesn't mean that they can't be compensated for the fair market value. And so we would, just like working with a private landowner, we would get an appraisal. We would usually have to get a review of that appraisal, and then we would seek grant funding to purchase that. And so long as there was nothing on the deed or a conservation easement or anything like that prohibited the city from, like, say, selling it to Big Y, then it would work just the same as if the city were a regular individual.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Other members' questions at this time? What's the process of creating a relationship, business to business? Is it project-based, or is it beyond that?
Right, I'm going to turn this over to Callie, but it can be project-based. So a lot of the time, Trust for Public Land becomes involved when we get a call from the city or we get a call from the land trust for a parcel within the city bounds, and they say, hey, we know that the city cares about this, and we also want to protect this. But sometimes it can start at sort of more of the 30,000-foot view, where we do an actual, park score analysis. And I'll let you talk a little bit, with the time we have on that.
Yeah, sure. So in the case of Bridgeport, we are the official waterfront implementation project manager for the city. So we have a contract with them. And so that relationship was set up sort of so we could really think through this multi-decade vision of the waterfront pathway. But that's a unique case. Many times it would be more project by project that things would come up. And yeah, just to mention on the park score piece, so one thing we've been doing in Connecticut, we do this on a really high level in nationally, which is that we take the 100 most populous cities and we analyze their parks across like using GIS, and they look for access and amenities, acreage, investment. I'm going to forget the last one, equity. But they basically give them a park score. How accessible is your park, out of 100? How equitable is your park out of 100? That kind of thing. And we've done this on a smaller scale in Connecticut. We've done custom park scores. So we've done that in Hartford, New Haven, and Stamford so far. And some of that work also dictates, wow, we see in New Haven that they have a pretty high 10-minute walk score, but their investment is really low. So how can we work with New Haven to perhaps identify and address a particular piece of that puzzle, if that makes sense?
But it can also just be a phone call, and we can sort of explore what's going on in the city and have a meeting and talk through some opportunities.
Well, as was previously stated, the Uncas Leap development is funded. As the warm weather returns, it will be finished. So it's not a matter of getting it done. This will be done. It's a matter of, can we gain that national park status? One of our U.S. senators, Richard Blumenthal, has been to the site, has espoused his support for such an effort. I don't know if you've ever worked with someone at his level. I'm going to assume you had. We've got almost $12 million ready to roll out to clean up a mill that was destroyed by arson several times. Down in the Greenville section, you talked about socioeconomic areas being lifted by such investment where some poverty and all that other stuff exists. So the funding is there, but that's to clean it. So we'd be looking for help, if possible, to then resurface, create a public park. This is an interesting site. There's a operating power generation canal on one side of this. The rest of it sits in the middle of the Shetucket River, basically. As an industrial city often did back then, water was the source. So, I mean, there's things moving along right now. The deal I talked about was a former Christmas tree farm that collapsed. Even after a state grant was announced and awarded, the owners, I don't know, they just decided they thought it was worth more, and so they canceled everything, which is a real shame. Balance is often a gain in a community. When you're developing this piece, you have balance over here, the next one piece, preserving it. And again, this council is on record supporting that particular deal, but if there's a discussion to be had about maybe saving that, that would be, I don't know the status of that award from the state, though. Whether it's been canceled or just sits out there in limbo, I have no idea what that is, but I think there's stuff to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely, we'd be happy to.
Thank you.
explore those
Other members? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Interesting.
Thank you for having us. If anyone needs to reach me, well, you guys can't see that, never mind. But there's my number. Oh, you can see it? Oh, you have one, okay.
Yeah, we have, thank you, yeah.
All right, got it.